Canada is basically caught between Trump, China, and a fragile economy. And this is very important. And I will explain to you what my rationale is. But I'm basically saying that Canada only has a certain amount of time, which is between now and July 2026, to slowly but surely either decouple or get together. But basically, Canada needs to make a decision between what to do between Trump, China, and its fragile economy. And it has until July 2026 because that's when the current agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. is basically coming up for not renewal, but rediscussion. Because technically, the deal that Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. is until 2036. But still, things are going to start to bite. And obviously, if you're Carney, when you started, you say, Canada for the Canadian, we're not the 51st rate, we're not a bunch of things. But now you realize who he's dealing with in the matter of the U.S. administration, and you realize it's going to be a little bit more difficult. And now it would appear that essentially Carney has excused himself, or at least excused his country for that commercial that came out not too long ago. And it's also in the process of cajoling and getting closer to China. What does that mean? Well, it's Canada is playing a very, very, very interesting game, right? Canada, which is under Prime Minister Mark Carney, is walking a narrow line between two dominant forces. You got to give credit where credit is due. I mean, between the U.S. administration renewed protectionism and China strategic economic engagement. And of course, Canada has to contend with the fact that these two countries are basically divorcing, decoupling, but slowly, but in a way that's going to benefit them both, which is hard to believe that this would actually happen, but it is possible. But anyway, Canada is caught in the middle. Canada is literally caught in the middle. And that is something that they're going to need to contend with because that could be a problem because Canada right now is having some issues. Canada is suffering. Yes. And we're going to need to find out and we're going to need to understand how this can be. Because it is not the most obvious thing that is going on right now. So we'll see. We'll study it. We'll try to understand it. We'll see what could potentially be the issue there. The issue that is going on right now with Canada, and frankly, might be a bit more complicated than we think. By that I mean that the country is slowly, the economy in Canada is okay right now, but it is slowing down, and that's not going to be an easy thing to manage going forward, and that's something that Canada needs to contend with. Now, how they're going to do that, we'll shall see. But the point is that the stakes are high. Okay, Canada's economic resilience, its role in North America, and its long-standing identity is at stake. This is actually happening. Now let's break this apart. So the first thing is, what is the current trade framework between the USMCA and the tariff shock? So basically, in 2020, you had Canada, you had Mexico, and you had the US that entered into in July 1st, 2020. It went into force in 2020, which is basically a trade agreement. And they have a joint review in 2026, and that's what's gonna hurt. And the expiration is 2036, unless all three parties agree to renew. So the U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement, better known as a USMCA, USMCA remains active, but the 2026 review could reshape it entirely. And Canada faces the possibility that Trump could demand major revisions or threaten withdrawal. So what to do? Now, on top of that, you get the new tariffs. Trump announced 35% on many Canadian imports, effective August 1st. Steel and aluminum already face 50% rate. And Canada exports and investment confidence are already weakening. Now, obviously, and this is what's upsetting and pissing off a lot of people in Canada, is that the U.S. is taking advantage that it is 25% of the global economy. The U.S. has 25% of the global economy, and therefore it's saying now it's time to pay up. And if you don't want to do with us, we'll do somewhere else. But we could do without you, but you can't do without us. So you have to pay up. And that's kind of the U.S. attitude, right? But Canada is hurting right now. Now, in terms of the impact of those tariffs between 0 to 3 months, the potential effect that you have price spike hikes and export losses in metal, auto, and agriculture. In 6 to 12 months, you could have business slowdown, delayed investment, job losses. In 1 to 3 years, you could have supply chain realignment and slower GDP and potential recession. Why do you think Carney is over in China trying to see what else he could do for his country? And right now, the current economic condition of Canada, right, is GDP growth is only 0.5% for the first quarter in 2025, while the US was at 3%. And the trend is slowing. Unemployment, 7%, rising. I mean, I know that you heard a lot of things. We're not going to take this from the U.S. We're not going to go to the U.S. We're not going to buy from the U.S. Do you want to pick that fight? Inflation is at 2%, but then again, how could you increase prices when you're starting to have an economic slowdown? And business investment is weak. The trend is flat. And they need to do something. And the economy is stable, but it's very fragile. Growth relies heavily on U.S. demand. You might like it or not like it. Now, of course, you're going to say, well, why are you doing this to me now? I thought we were friends. And that's it. It's over. This is not 2020. This is 2025. So productivity and private investment remain Canada weak spots. And that's going to be a problem. Now, what's at stake for Canada? Well, essentially, it's a big deal for them. It's a very big deal for them. Because at stake is, number one, economic sovereignty. Roughly 75% of export going to the U.S., Canada's vulnerability to American tariff is acute. They thought the party would go on forever, but you have to understand that the U.S. is running huge trade deficits with everyone. You cannot have a trade deficit and a fiscal deficit. Right? Owe a lot of money to people, and everybody make things for you and you just buy. So what do? You just raise debt to buy stuff overseas? It does not end well for anyone. You need to make it here. Carney's goal is to reduce his dependence through new partnerships in Europe and Asia while strengthening internal trade with Canada while not upsetting the U.S. So basically what you're doing is we're going to do business with Europe. All right, you could do it. We're going to try Asia. Oh, be careful. You're going to do business with China now? Well, that's going to be very upsetting to the U.S. Number two, industrial and in technology base, Canada's clean tech, EV battery and resource sector could thrive, but only if the government policy attracts both Western and Asian investment without alienating Washington. I mean, this is he's got a very tough job because on one hand, he needs to make his country better again without upsetting the U.S., and while basically, decoupling from the U.S., if that's even possible, and going to China? I mean, China and Canada have an interesting history. Look, look back a few months. Carney's Trump-proofing plan includes higher defense spending and Arctic sovereignty measures, ensuring that Canada stays a trusted NATO ally while retaining control over its northern frontier. On top of that, there's a geopolitical issue that Canada needs to wrestle with. And of course, on top of that, it's got global credibility. Canada's value lies in being a trusted mediator. Right? So if it tilts towards either the US, which I don't think that's the case anymore, or China, be careful, risk losing that middle power influence in forums like the G7 and the WTO. You're going to say, who's your daddy now? And of course, for all countries, there's a national identity. Carney has, he has kept saying that Canada will never be part of the United States. If it's so true, why you have to keep saying it? And it summarizes the emotional core of its policy, national independence in an era of coercive geopolitics. Now, of course, you're going to say, but this is ridiculous. Canada is never going to be part of the U.S. Are you sure? Because there's a lot of things that we thought were not possible and are happening right now. We never thought that, I don't know, we would, never have 50% tariffs on India. India didn't get along too well with the current administration, and they have 50% tariffs. That's not impossible. That is happening as we speak. 39% on Switzerland? That's happening as we speak. Now, remember, keep in mind, you have to look at both sides, right? You can't just think, wow, look at the U.S. It's terrible. 39%, 50%. I thought you were a friend. Well, don't forget that India charges the U.S. just as much if they want to import soy to India. Okay, so there's a tariff there going on. And if you want to ship, or if you want to send your cheese to Switzerland, you also have, because they want to protect their industry. So what's been happening is the U.S. is trying to protect its own, and people don't understand what's happening. And this is horrible. Well, everybody else has been doing it. Well, yeah, but so you were so big and powerful, yeah, the U.S. could afford not to do anything, but now it looks like they have to do something. Now, what happens if, Carney just doesn't do anything? You just say, forget it. This is too complicated. I am not going to deal with this. I will just let it happen. Right? What are the implications of it? Well, essentially, if the Carney government delays action or maintains a low profile during the tariff escalation and USMCA review, the USMCA review, you're going to have economic stagnation. So Carney needs to do something. GDP growth could sink below 1% with rising unemployment and weaker export. 2, fiscal strain. Slower growth means lower revenues and higher spending needs. So fiscally, that's going to hurt. 3, industrial erosion. Firms relocate production to the U.S. to avoid tariffs. Right? That is basically what the U.S. administration wants. Bring the stuff over, and I won't charge you the tariffs. I mean, the U.S. is running a hard bargain, which had never done before. And of course, they could afford to do it. Again, they're 25% of GDP worldwide. So, of course, the loss of leverage. Canada risks being viewed as a reactive, not strategic. So what are you doing? And now, of course, since Carney apologized to Trump because of that commercial about the president Reagan's, use of President Reagan's against the tariffs and all that. I don't know. Domestic frustration, regional and class division widens, feeding political discontent. So what are you supposed to do? You were supposed to protect us against the U.S. and you can't do anything. So the alternative is an active Carney strategy, and that's what you're seeing right now. But that is fraught with concern. A visible, proactive approach could stabilize the economy, but diversifying exports toward Asia, Europe, and clean energy partners, incentivizing domestic manufacturing and productivity, investing in innovation, positioning Canada as a dependable sovereign ally, neither a U.S. proxy nor Chinese client. We shall see. But I mean, if they're on the current path, we're talking about 1 to 1.2% growth and 8% unemployment. If it's totally passive, then we're talking 0 to 0.5% and maybe 9% unemployment. And of course, you're active, that's what he's doing now, maybe you get to see 2% growth. So the fate over the next decade hinges on whether Carney's leadership remains cautious or becomes assertive. If he hides behind cautious tariffs and slow growth and foreign leverage, it could trap Canada in stagnation. If he acts decisively and diversifying trade, boosting productivity and defending sovereignty, Canada could emerge as one of the few stable democracies able to balance the world to great powers. But you need a leader for that. Is he the guy to do it? And that's the big question right now. Is he the guy? Is Carney the guy to do what he said that he's going to do to become more independent? So his strategy right now, and let's see what that works. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because I look for all geopolitical issue. So basically what Canada is doing, and let's see if that's going to work, but Canada is moving to reduce its dependency on the U.S., right? So obviously it's been happy with the U.S. for so many years, but no longer. Canada says that the U.S.-Canada relationship can't happen overnight, but we're moving very fast. He's emphasized Canadian sovereignty and the message that Canada is not a junior partner. Do you think that this is going to resonate with the U.S.? So how is Canada responding with the tariff threats? Well, it's preparing countermeasures, be careful, especially around steel, aluminum, and autos. At the same time, it's pursuing internal structural reforms, eliminate trade barriers to boost its economic independently. And it's showing willingness to engage in new negotiation with the U.S. for an updated economic and security relationship. Do you think that the current administration cares? I mean, it is boosting its military spending and focusing on the Arctic as a strategic point. And with China, what is Canada doing with China? Remember, there was a visit recently. What the heck are you doing there? Well, Canada is taking steps to reset or mend its relationship with China. There was a period of tension with China. And don't forget, China has been fighting with a lot of countries, including India, by the way. There was a war with India not too long ago. For example, a meeting between Carney and Xi Jinping was described as a turning point in Canada-China relations. They hadn't been visited there for 8 years, and suddenly Canada is going to China. Wow. So issues on the table include foreign interference. Canada had concluded China interfered in Canadian elections, by the way, and bilateral trade and investment. Canada is seeking diversification. Now, obviously, if you're China, you could see them coming a mile away. You say, now you're coming to me. You can't get along with Trump. Now you're coming to me. You have to understand at these kind of level, these are very crude and shrewd, right? And they're purely interests. I mean, what can Canada do? Canada is a small country. U.S. is a big country. U.S. is 25% GDP. What can you do about something like that? I mean, it's going to take years. And you've grown very dependent on the U.S. And now you'd say, no more. Well, it's time to pay the piper. So this overall strategy means, basically diversification and sovereignty, and where Carney's government wants Canada to be less vulnerable to external economic and geopolitical coercion. That's nice. It wants to balance, right, engagement and firm red lines. On one hand, Canada is engaging with both powers. On the other hand, it is drawing clearer lines about what it will tolerate. Number three, the strategy doesn't treat trade and security as separate. They are linked. Going to put it together. Defending investment, Arctic sovereignty, and trade independence are part of one package. So the challenge is engaging China's risk backlash at home, human rights, interference concern, and from allies. A tougher stand toward the U.S. risk economic pain given how closely integrated Canada is with the U.S. economy. Sometimes you have to know when to give up. You have to know when you're not going to win. I mean, you could, maybe at the end of the day, what Carney is doing is I got to do something. I got to position myself, right? But what can he do? There's not much he can do. There's not much he can do. You're going to get that close to China, be careful. Because China and you didn't get along so well. And on top of that, you could alienate even more the US. I think when the US said you're going to be the 51st state, they meant it. You may not like it, you may not want it, you may not desire it, but if you know who you're dealing with, there is no giving up. The US president, once his mind has been made up, he doesn't change it that very often, no matter how crazy the idea is. And that could be a problem, because at the end of the day, what is Carney's underlying goal? Well, I guess he wants strategic autonomy, not aligning too closely with either Washington or Beijing. Well, sure, now you don't want to because you're being asked to pay the piper with the U.S. It didn't bother you before. And they say, well, the U.S., I thought we were friends. There is no such thing as friend. When he says that, he's just talking to the population. People tend to think in life in terms of friends and enemies. No, there's none of that. It's a very cold, cold world. It's only interests. So what is in the interest of Canada? Oh, we need to be independent. And can you really be? Can you really be? You didn't do anything for so many years. How could you turn that over like that? And by going to China, you're threatening the U.S.? So this narrative allows him to justify limited cooperation with China, maybe on green tech and critical minerals, as part of protecting Canada from U.S. volatility rather than causing up to Beijing. So you're not really with someone, you're against somebody else. That's not enough. And then, of course, there's a Trump sensitivity. I mean, the Trump administration sees any deepening ties with China as a litmus test of loyalty. And you've seen how the president treats loyalty. All the people closest to him are the most loyal to him. He's not making the same mistake he did in the first administration. Trump has threatened new tariffs on countries playing both sides. A warning aimed squarely at Canada and the EU. And the EU is tried a little bit, and then they went back home. They didn't want to pursue it too long. He's using trade leverage as both economic punishment and negotiation pressure to force allies into his anti-China camp. So even modest gestures toward Beijing could be read in Washington as defiance. How you deal with something like that? That's why Carney is careful to couple every outreach to China with a visible concession. It's not going to work. That is never going to work. And of course, China wants symbolic normalization after years of tension. But Beijing knows Carney can't risk appearing pro-China while Trump is in the White House again. So they've kept it subtle. More about quiet trade felicitation, student exchange, and supply chain cooperation than flashy summits. But I mean, can that read? I mean, Carney can rebuild economic bridges with China, but not strategic one. Any perception of military or tech cooperation would trigger a U.S. backlash. Be careful. Ottawa must maintain alignment on security issues. So, Canada is in big trouble right now. They're not doing well economically, and yet they need to thread that very, 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 very fine lines. Now, are they going to be successful? We shall see. How long could this go on? We shall see. Now, of course, the question is, well, wait a second. You keep picking on Canada. Are there any other countries like that? I mean, yes, there are several mid-power economies that are trying similar walk the tightrope strategy between Trump, revive U.S. economic nationalism, and China re-engagement push. Things are moving around. Australia, for example, is doing very well. Cooperate without capitulation, right? I mean, Canberra was first to feel Beijing economic coercion from 2020-22 bans on coal, wine, and barley. So the PM, Anthony Albanese, has reopened trade while keeping the Australian and Five Eyes military ties intact. The playbook, lifted tone with Chinese, quietly pushed for resumed Chinese tourism and kept full alignment with Washington on defense. You got to pick your battles. You can't do everything with everyone. France and Germany, de-risk, not decouple. So that line, de-risk, not decouple, by Ursula von der Leyen basically matches Carney's tone. We will de-risk our relationship with China, but will not decouple. France under Macron, pursues Airbus deals and cultural diplomacy with China. Germany did the same thing. Framed China engagement as European economic sovereignty rather than political softness. India did quite well. Multi-alignment. Modi trades with Russia and China while deepening Quad ties with the US, Japan, and Australia. Is that really working with Trump? No. But they're trying. Brazil, everyone's partner, nobody's proxy. Is that really working with Trump? No. I mean, it's not a miracle that Brazil is out, India is out, maybe Australia, France, and Germany, but it looks like out of the 6, Canada is out as well. So this is going to be a lot more difficult. Don't forget to join the channel. Don't forget to, because what I do is and as a member, I provide you information to take advantage of this situation, right? Because obviously, what does that mean? How can you make? Well, first of all, you can make money in the stock market with this kind of information and how to treat it, right? Because you're going to see whether or not Canada is going to be able to get out of its morass, because Canada's economy right now is not doing well at all. It is not. Canada is not doing well. Canada's GDP shrink more than expected as it is being hit by the Donald Trump tariffs. Unfortunately, that is the fact. So if you know that, and if you know that ultimately, unless Canada capitulates, it's going to be very difficult for it to remain relevant. But regardless, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time for Canada to become its own. So there's going to be a lot of volatility. I mean, you hear it back and forth, right? They were doing well, and then suddenly that commercial comes out, and then it's a disaster. And that is what you need to watch out for. So Canada right now is going to be a source of volatility, and we need to be very careful to understand exactly where that volatility is going to come from.